And now I'd like to invite our speaker for today, one of our own members, Mark Dickens, and he'll speak on the topic of love, compassion, and the U.S. Army.
Thanks. Good morning.
Good morning.
And now for something completely different. So I know I'm just exactly who you'd expect to be standing up here giving the Valentine's Day message. As Jennifer said, our topic today is love, compassion, and the United States Army. And I can already see some of you thinking this will be at least interesting to see how we can connect those dots. Also, here's a public service announcement for Eric Ledyard and the rest of his friends. This isn't going to be a talk about love in the Army. It's about love and the Army. Okay, here's a quote to get us started. Although a soldier by profession, I have never felt any sort of fondness for war, and I have never advocated it, except as a means of peace. Ulysses S. Grant. And a lot of folks don't realize the folks in the Army are often not warlike until they have to be. I've been asked to tell you a little bit about myself and then somehow tell you how the love ties in with the Army. This wasn't my idea. This was Philip's idea. So, I joined the Army when I was 18 after working as a construction laborer, tire repair guy, and in the foundry at the Newport News shipyard. I discovered I didn't want to be doing that the rest of my life. Problem was my grades were only average, and I didn't have enough money for college. My dad was an Air Force fighter pilot, so I joined the Army. I intended to stay 4 years and then get out. Somehow I ended up staying 30. I went from private up to staff sergeant in 10 years, then was commissioned and retired as a lieutenant colonel 20 years later. Now on to love. First, we need to agree on terms. What is love? Rather than coming up with my own definition, I researched it in the most authoritative encyclopedia of all time. And Wikipedia tells us love is a variety of different feelings, states, and attitudes that ranges from interpersonal affection, as in, I love my mother, to pleasure. I loved that meal. It can refer to an emotion of a strong attraction and personal attachment, as in, I love the Dallas Cowboys. The next one is the aspect of love I want to focus on today. It can be a virtue representing human kindness, compassion, and affection, the unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of another. I'd argue our country itself is an unusually compassionate country. What country gives more for world peace in terms of treasure and blood than the United States? Many Americans would like our government to stop getting involved in volatile, unstable countries throughout the world, giving away billions of our hard-earned tax dollars and risking the lives of our sons and daughters, as well as the prestige of our nation. But there are bullies out there in power around the world, and we can't fix them all, but what would a compassionate country do? A compassionate country has to do something, but it also has to balance the needs of other countries and the needs of its own people. We in the United States are the haves. As a country, we have a lot going for us. It's our responsibility to help have-not countries. You'd agree probably that members of the police, firefighters, teachers, some government representatives, and our military are in many cases drawn to those fields by a sense of compassion for others. Okay, but it still seems a stretch to try to say the Army is a tool of love. When we think of love, our minds conjure images of soft, warm, furry kittens, puppies, happy, comfort, propagation, and our partners. Orson Welles is credited with saying, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence in their behalf." So maybe we can agree a little bit that soldiers have compassion for their fellow human beings. After all, they have sworn to give their lives in their defense. But not really compassion in the same way as the Peace Corps volunteer has compassion. When we think Peace Corps, we think peace, help, build, enable, teach, grow, love, kind, generous, giving, open-minded, inclusive, compassionate, and self-sacrifice. For some of us, the Peace Corps volunteers represent true compassion for their fellow human beings. And here's a little bit about the Peace Corps you may not be familiar with. They travel to underdeveloped countries and work for about 2 years, living in less than modern facilities in many cases, and on relatively low wages, designed to enable them to live as well as, but not better than, the people they're there to help. The Peace Corps does amazing work around the world and is currently engaged in 68 countries. But they don't recruit the average Joe. 90% of volunteer positions require at least a bachelor's degree. About 25% of volunteers work in the areas of economic development, agriculture, and the environment. And about 75% work in education and health. They fill a huge gap, but there's other gaps. In contrast, when we think of the Army, some descriptors might be war, violence, kill, destroy, single-minded, closed-minded, regimented, lockstep, can't find a real job, war hungry, and really not well-educated. Not really in the same league as the Peace Corps, right? I'd agree, but for different reasons, probably. The reality is they are both among the best in the world at what they do, and both are desperately important to world peace. And what if I told you the Army had its own version of the Peace Corps? It's bigger, and it's working in almost twice as many countries. More about that in a minute. But both are interested in spreading peace. What, you say? The Army is interested in spreading peace? Absolutely. Who do you think gets shot when we go to war? Army guys. Not interested in that. That doesn't mean the Army folks won't go to war. They will. They're often the first to see the need for war and see it as a necessity. But no, the only folks who would ever want to go to war are folks who have never been to war. Now, what one organization does the Army have that may combine the best of both worlds? I'd say the Army Special Forces. That's where we're tying the two together. When most of us picture Special Forces soldiers, we imagine commandos kicking down doors and taking out bad guys. You remember the A-Team TV show? The real Special Forces is a little bit different. Their motto is not, "We will kill you all and let God sort them out." It is "De oppresso liber," which means to liberate the oppressed. Each A-Team is populated by 12 soldiers who are relatively senior in both rank and age. They must score at least 10% or 10 points above the Army average or the world average on Army IQ test. They have to be exceptionally physically fit, and they must know at least one more language. They're independent self-starters, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, and of course have enlarged egos. As an aside, some say Special Forces soldier cannot feel love, compassion, or empathy. But this is not true. It's just that those feelings are directed only at themselves. In hotspots around the world, the Green Berets are the first in and the last out. You'll remember that months before regular forces arrived, our first pictures out of Afghanistan were of individual Special Forces soldiers with long beards, trailing scarves, and Army fatigues, riding horses into combat alongside Afghan warriors. And now that most of the U.S. military has redeployed home, it's the Special Forces who remain in Afghanistan, continuing to teach and help the Afghans. Tracing their lineage back to the OSS in World War II, they're experts in direct action missions and masters of unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense. They infiltrate foreign countries, raise armies, and train them to fight. They become a shortcut for screenwriters to give characters inexplicable, almost superhuman fighting abilities. But they are, in fact, the best in the world at intelligently applied violence. But they're surgical. They don't take out large units. Well, except for during the Cold War, when we had what we call green light teams, who were trained to parachute deep behind enemy lines carrying backpack nuclear weapons. They were also told that they wouldn't go off as soon as you push that button. Here are a few other things you might not know about Special Forces. First, the SEALs and the Rangers are not Special Forces. They're some of the best in the world at what they do, but they are Special Operations Forces. The Marines do not have Special Forces. Only the Army has Special Forces, and they wear the Green Beret. This was instituted by John F. Kennedy in 1961, ironically, just 6 months after he stood up the Peace Corps. And because of this, he will forever hold a special place in the hearts of all Special Forces soldiers. Like the French Foreign Legion, Special Forces teams are often like a mini United Nations. They include representatives from most nations of the world. Some of these individuals having escaped oppression in their own countries and made their way to the United States and enlisted in the Army. From the beginning, SF has been more inclusive than any other military force. It's a hallmark of the unit. It doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from or what you sound like, as long as you're good. Well, except for women. They don't include women, yet. Special Forces is organized in what you call groups. Each group has a geographic focus. Like the 7th group is focused on Latin America. 10th group has Eastern Europe and Northeastern Europe, and so on. Each group has 3 battalions, and each battalion has 3 companies. Each company has 6 A-teams, just to give you an idea of the scale. Each of these units is further focused on a smaller and smaller piece of the world. So when you get down to an A-team, they're focused on just a small section of a country. Each A-team has a piece of the world, and they focus on that piece of the world. Right now, today, in addition to their other military training, these teams are continually studying the language, the culture, the land, the towns, the roads, current events happening in that small piece of the world, and all the people in that area. In some cases, included on these A-teams are soldiers who grew up in that area or perhaps in the adjacent country. So they've got a lot of knowledge right there in the team. This means that when something happens anywhere in the world, the president has at his immediate disposal a trained and ready force prepared to go at a moment's notice. They're not picking up a book to learn about the area for the first time. Half of the Special Forces mission is to conduct direct action missions, things like parachuting or scuba diving behind enemy lines to destroy key objectives like command and control sites, bridges, railroad tunnels, or to snatch enemy leaders or pick up downed pilots. This is the other part, just the part that goes into love. What you might not know is that the other half of their job is just as important, and it's actually the most difficult of their training: unconventional warfare and foreign internal defense. That's where they become teachers, in what we might call the Army's version of the Peace Corps. In many ways, all Special Forces soldiers are soldier ambassadors. In fact, when in country, they often report directly to the American ambassador, if there is one. They usually operate alone in a 12-man A-team, living and working within a tribe or a village or guerrilla freedom fighter group, which always far outnumbers them. Because of this, gaining and keeping the trust and support of locals is crucial to their success and even to their survival. This is not the place for a blustering, loud-talking, chest-beating, ugly American. They wouldn't survive. You also won't see men with bodybuilder bodies like Mr. T or Sylvester Stallone. They couldn't hang. Too much useless muscle to carry around and feed. That type doesn't last when the rations are cut and distances get long. Wait a minute, I hear you protest. That guy on the stage looks just like Mr. T. Of course, it's been a number of years since I was actually on an A-team. And A-teams are led by a captain, a rank normally entrusted with units of 100 or more soldiers. The other team members are all sergeants or above, no privates. A team includes 2 weapons experts, 2 medics, 2 engineers, 2 communications sergeants, 2 intel operations sergeants, a warrant officer, and a captain, all senior, each with various years of training and widely varying experience. It takes about as long to train a Special Forces soldier as it does a fighter pilot. I used to tell my father. Unlike other Army units, which lose and gain people every month, the A-Team stays together for years. They're intimately familiar with each other, their skills and their personalities. They know exactly what each is going to do in any given situation. They work hard together and they play hard together. They and their families socialize when off duty, and when the team is deployed, the families stick together and help each other out. No unit comes close to the level of camaraderie and closeness that exists on an A-Team, the possible exception of Delta. They're experts at destruction, but also experts at building. Every SF soldier is a teacher at his core. You can't be an SF soldier if you can't teach. While the weapons experts are organizing and training groups of men to fire weapons and infantry tactics, that's what I used to do, not the smart guys. Smart guys, which are the medics and the engineers, are working as well. The engineers teach demolitions, but they also teach how to build bridges, schools, clinics, how to dig clean water wells, irrigation techniques for the farmers. The commo sergeants are radio experts who are as comfortable using a satellite radio as a Morse code keypad. They're trained to live in austere environments. They create a dipole antenna out of a barbed wire fence using plastic MRE spoons, and send and receive AM radio signals halfway around the world using a hand crank generator. SF medics are the best trained medics in any branch of the military, and they receive the most extensive training of all SF soldiers. They can walk into a village and quickly establish a medical clinic. They can diagnose the diseases found in the third world and prescribe medicine for treatment. They can vaccinate villagers, perform minor surgery, deliver babies, treat infants and children, bandage wounds, and set broken bones. They're trained in parasitology to identify bacteria found in wells. They can even perform dentistry. What's more, they have basic training in veterinary science, which can be invaluable to farmers and animal herders. The team members also teach ethics by their actions and interactions. They show by example how to have power and not abuse it. They don't take from people, they give. They help the people improve their own lives, teaching them to fish rather than just giving them things. They don't try to change the culture of the people. They learn their culture and operate within it. They go places the Peace Corps cannot go and provide some of the same assistance. These men place themselves at the mercy of the people they're trying to help. They leave their loved ones for long periods of time, living in discomfort and hardship, knowingly risking not only their lives, but the futures of their families, to give other people a better chance in life. Our Army and Special Forces in particular clearly shares the UU goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.